Welcome back to The Explainer. So, Earth's history, yeah, it's pretty brutal. Over hundreds of millions of years, our planet has put life through this relentless gauntlet of cataclysms. We're talking toxic oceans, skies literally raining fire, the whole shebang. But against all of those odds, some ancient forms of life just kept going. Today, we're digging into the wild mystery of how these ultimate survivors managed to cheat death. And we're going to focus really closely on one absolute miracle of a plant, the Wollemi Pine, to figure out exactly how it outlived the dinosaurs and survived the impossible.
Seriously though, how do you survive the end of the world? It sounds like straight-up science fiction, I know, but I want you to actually imagine surviving the end of the world. And not just once, but multiple times. Earth has hit the reset button in these profoundly violent ways where the vast majority of living things were just completely wiped off the map. To really appreciate the survivors we're looking at today, we first got to wrap our heads around the sheer, terrifying scale of the destructive forces they somehow dodged. Just look at this terrifying resume. Back 480 million years ago, the Ordovician extinction slapped the planet with rapid global cooling, then intense global warming, and this massive drop in ocean oxygen. That wiped out 85% of all life right there. Fast forward a bit to 66 million years ago, the Cretaceous extinction. A 7-mile-wide asteroid slams into the Gulf of Mexico with the force of like 1 million hydrogen bombs. It broiled the surface, blocked out the sun with a winter of dust for years. But you know what? Nestled right in the middle of this timeline is something even worse. Right in the middle sits this one, absolutely terrifying number, 96%. 250 million years ago, the Permian extinction, which scientists cheerily call the Great Dying, literally wiped out 96% of all life on Earth. Massive Siberian volcanic eruptions spewed out greenhouse gases like methane, triggering this horrific volcanic winter, and oceans that were completely starved of oxygen. When ecosystems collapse that thoroughly, it really brings up the ultimate biological question. How on Earth did anything make it through? And even crazier, how are some of those ancient survivors literally still around today?
Well, that brings us to a super fascinating scientific concept, the Lazarus taxon. Paleobiologists Carl Flessa and David Jablonski actually coined this term back in 1983. In paleontology and conservation, this refers to species that, for all intents and purposes, return from the dead. They vanished completely from the fossil record, sometimes for millions of years, so scientists confidently stamped them as extinct. Until, bam, they're suddenly rediscovered alive, usually just hiding out in these really isolated, obscure, or super specialized habitats.
A classic example happened in 1938. A 31-year-old South African museum curator named Marjorie Courtney Latimer was checking out a local fisherman's catch, right? And she spots this incredibly strange, primitive-looking fish. It was a Coelacanth. Now, to the scientific community, Coelacanths were this 400-million-year-old missing link between fish and the first land animals. They were presumed long, long gone. As the scientist J.L.B. Smith famously put it, finding one alive was like walking down the street and running into a dinosaur.
So how exactly did the Coelacanth pull off this crazy magic trick? Honestly, it survived by hiding. It literally just dropped off the continental shelf and into these deep, dark underwater caves. Over millions of years, it developed some incredibly specialized, frankly bizarre biology. It has this jelly-filled cavity in its head, an elaborate electroreceptive rostral organ to pick up on the tiniest electrical impulses from its prey. It's got these highly reflective crystal ball eyes to capture whatever faint traces of light make it to the deep ocean. And rather than laying vulnerable eggs, it gives live birth after a multi-year pregnancy. It basically found a completely secluded niche and just stayed out of the way of global catastrophes.
And there are definitely other miraculous survivors in this exclusive Lazarus Club. The Laotian rock rat, thought extinct for 11 million years, found alive in 1996. The Chacoan Peccary was only known from fossils from the 1930s until living herds were just wandering around the Gran Chaco region in South America in 1974. And obviously the horseshoe crab, which is a living fossil still hanging out on our shorelines today. But there's a grim reality here. Modern human threats are endangering these survivors all over again. Severe deforestation for soy and cattle in the Gran Chaco is driving the peccary's numbers dangerously low, and horseshoe crabs, they're losing their mating beaches to climate change and human development.
Section 2, the botanical find of this century. Okay, let's pivot over to the plant kingdom, to a living organism that was thriving 91 million years ago when T. rexes were still roaming around. The time gaps we're dealing with here are just wild.
While the Coelacanth vanished around 66 million years ago when the asteroid hit, the Wollemi Pine disappeared from the fossil record about 2 million years ago. It was considered unequivocally extinct, gone. Then, in 1994, an off-duty park ranger named Dave Noble was abseiling through this incredibly dense, unexplored part of Australia's Wollemi National Park. He happens to stumble upon a really unusual-looking tree, grabs a sample, shows it to botanists, and the scientific community absolutely lost their minds. It was a totally new species to modern eyes, but a deeply, deeply ancient one to the Earth.
Which brings us to the big question. Why did the Wollemi Pine survive when so much of the prehistoric world just perished? Well, it's basically a miracle of geography. The original population managed to scrape by staying perfectly, flawlessly hidden inside a tiny, deep, incredibly remote canyon in the Blue Mountains. This highly secluded microclimate shielded them from the massive climate swings, the brutal ice ages, and those devastating bushfires that scoured the rest of the continent over millions of years. They essentially found the absolute ultimate hiding spot.
But finding that hiding spot also highlighted a really terrifying fragility. Out in the wild, in that original secluded canyon, there are, get this, less than 90 original trees left, and only about half of them are even fully grown. I mean, think about that. This is a species that outlived the literal dinosaurs, but its entire original wild existence comes down to just a few dozen individuals clinging to life in one single gorge.
Because their numbers are that small, the modern threats they face are completely existential. One severe bushfire could wipe the whole slate clean. In fact, the horrific 2019 bushfires destroyed hundreds of trees at secondary sites and got terrifyingly close to the original grove. But you know what the most insidious threat is? Us, humans. Unauthorized visitors trying to play explorer and find the secret grove can unintentionally track in Phytophthora. It's a microscopic, completely incurable root rot pathogen. It literally takes one single grain of infected soil on the bottom of a hiker's boot to introduce this lethal disease. And sadly, it's already threatening some of those remaining original trees.
Since the stakes are literally life or extinction, national park teams have set up this extreme conservation protocol that sounds like it's straight out of a spy movie. First off, the exact location of the canyon is a closely guarded sworn secret. No exceptions. When researchers absolutely have to go in there, they have to spray down their boots, backpacks, and all their gear with methylated spirits just to kill any stray pathogens. And finally, as a backup, conservationists take these secret helicopter rides deep into other undisclosed wilderness areas to establish translocation sites. They plant hundreds of new seedlings there just to create an insurance population in case the worst happens to the original grove.
But rebuilding the Wollemi Pine population? Yeah, that is an exercise in extreme patience. These seedlings and saplings grow at a glacial pace. We're talking less than 1 centimeter a year. It takes decades upon decades for them to finally reach the 20 to 30 meter rainforest canopy where they can actually get full sunlight and mature. So this isn't some quick fix. This is a multi-generational effort that's going to require incredibly dedicated long-term human custodianship.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty profound realization. We are currently living through what scientists call the sixth mass extinction. Except this is the first one in Earth's history that isn't being caused by an asteroid or a volcanic winter. It's being caused by one single species, us. The Wollemi Pine, the Coelacanth, the Chacoan Peccary, they survived the absolute worst nature could throw at them just by finding a secluded refuge, only to end up facing their greatest threat from human expansion. So as we keep altering the planet, we really have to ask ourselves, 1,000,000 years from now, what life will have actually survived our era? Which species will be the Lazarus taxa of tomorrow?